Yo, so we're going to be talking about the kettlebell swing, the basic technique for the swing, which is the most fundamental kettlebell exercise. It's a hip hinge, like the deadlift. So to hinge the hips, you need to tilt the pelvis and push the bum back. The difference between a hinge and a squat is with a squat, although the pelvis does tilt, the knees come forward and you come straight down. With a hip hinge, the knees don't move. They're not locked, but the movement is back from the knees. So you need to, when you're hinging, you need to imagine that you're standing up to your knees in quicksand and you're trying to get your bum as far back and away from your head as you possibly can. So the movement is from the knee back. So if you look, when I'm standing here, the hip and the knee are stacked. So shoulders, hip, knee, ankles are all stacked on top of each other. When you hinge, you tilt the pelvis, you push the hips back, the knees flex, but they don't come forward. And now you have about a 20 or 30 degree bend at the knee and about a 40 to 50 degree bend at the hips here. So it's a pivot at the hip joint. Now, there's a few ways we can drill that motion before we move on to doing the swing. A really simple way to do it is to grab yourself a foam roller if you have one. It doesn't have to be a long one like this. You can do it with the smaller one. Place the foam roller at the top of your thighs. Your feet should be around hip width and flat. So wear nice flat shoes or bare feet or socks. Then you're going to keep the arms locked out and rigid, pack the shoulders down and really flare the lats or pack your shoulder blades down your back, brace the abs, and then you hinge the hip by pushing your bum back, pushing against the foam roller, keeping those arms locked out. So you let the foam roller, your arms roll over the foam roller as your hips push back. You're getting a stretch through the glutes, so those muscles at the back of the hip. You're getting a stretch through the hamstrings, the muscles at the back of the leg. So you'll be feeling the stretch from your hip to the back of your knee if you're doing it correctly. What I don't want to be seeing is this. Okay? So push the foam roller tight against your quads, against your thighs, pack the shoulders down, brace the abs, and then push the bum back like you're trying to push a door shut with your bum. The spine doesn't move. Okay, so there's another little drill that we can do just to test that. This is a dowling rod. Now, in an ideal world, you will have show it this way, 1, 2, and 3 points of contact on the rod. Now, if your upper back is more rounded, you might not get your head there. So you at least want the mid back and your tailbone on the rod, and then when you hinge your hips, the spine doesn't move, and you keep pushing the bum back until you feel that stretch. Okay? If you're doing this and that starts to happen, you're not hinging the hips, you're just flexing the back. So we've got to keep that spine rigid, the torso tight, push the hips back, and practice that motion. Now, depending on how flexible your hamstrings are, it will determine how deep into the hinge you can get. Some of you, you might only get there, which is fine to start with. What you don't want to be doing is trying to go further and then putting the back into it, because when you're moving weights around, that's going to be dangerous for the back. Okay, so that's the hinge. So just as you would with a deadlift, if you're picking the weight up off the floor, you're hinging the hips, you're not moving the back. You can load up the hinge by doing a Romanian deadlift. So it's exactly the same movement that we just practiced, but now you're holding a weight in front of you. Let the weight slide down your thighs. Don't worry about where the weight is. Don't think about lifting the weight up and down. Think about moving your hips back, and then that stretch in the hamstrings will tell you when you've gone deep enough into the hinge. Again, we're not doing this. So the back, the torso remains tight and compact, the hips move back, the knees are flexed, and you're stretching out those hamstrings and the glutes. So if you're really new to this, drill the hip hinge movement without weight, and then drill it with the weight by doing a Romanian deadlift or RDL, as I just demonstrated. Now, as for the swing, the setup, there's the weight. You want to be 1 or 2 foot's length back from the kettlebell. Feet at least hip width, if not shoulder width. We hinge the hips, grab the kettlebell, tilt the kettlebell and pack the shoulders down. This is a nice stable position here. I'm not unbalanced at all. If I let go, I'm still in that position. My torso doesn't move. Okay? So I'm going to show you the full swing and then I'm going to break it down. Okay, so let's break it down. So you hinge the hips, grab the kettlebell, pack the shoulders and tilt the kettlebell, shifting your weight back slightly. Now from here we're going to do what we call the hike. So just like in American football where the centre hikes the ball to the quarterback, we're going to do that. So you're just going to bring the kettlebell back and then quickly down. Your torso isn't going to move. Yep, so it's that motion. If you're in the right position, if you're balanced, if everything's packed and tight, you're not going to topple over. You'll know you're doing it wrong because this will happen and you'll be all over the shop. So there's your starting position. Hike it up to your undercarriage and then quickly bring it back to that start position. Then we move on to the dead stop swing. So you start from there, you hike the kettlebell back. As soon as it's here, think about pushing your heels down and bringing the hips forward. So the hips come forward. You push against the floor to lock the legs out, and then you stand up, everything's stacked. It's like you're doing a standing plank. So you're going from hinge to plank and everything's tight. The kettlebell will swing naturally. You're not trying to move the kettlebell, you're trying to move your hips. The kettlebell will swing because your arms are loose like chains. And then back down. So it's hike, push the floor down, snap the hips and break like you're planking in a standing position. Let the kettlebell swing up to 0 gravity. The height of the kettlebell swing will be determined by the power of the hip hinge. Once the kettlebell reaches its natural settling point, you bring it back down. What you don't want to do is let it get away from you. So you keep the shoulders tight and you bring the kettlebell back towards your undercarriage, not beyond your knees. So if you do it wrong, it looks like this. So you're putting the back into it. We don't want that. So hips and lock out and brace in a neutral standing position. As I say, the arms should be loose like they're ropes or chains attached to the kettlebell. So the kettlebell is moving with momentum that's driven by the hips. So again, the dead stop swing and back down. Once you've got the hang of that, I like to use some training wheels just to train that lockout. So we use a rubber band, stand on the band, and we're just going to do a few swings without putting the kettlebell down. So you start off, hips are hinged, weight is back, shoulders are packed. So you get more feedback with the band. You feel the lockout more at the top because there's a little bit of extra tension there, and then it kind of pings the kettlebell back, and then you have to get deep into that hinge to decelerate the movement of the kettlebell. So that's an option to help you train that hip hinge. And then once you've got the hang of it, you just do the full swing. So I would advise you to film yourself doing this. If you notice that your hips are coming forward and you're bending the back at the top, that generally indicates that you're not hinging deep enough. So you need to preload the glutes and the hamstrings to ensure there's enough power generation to get the power and strength through the hip hinge to move the kettlebell at speed. As I say, you tame the arc on the way down so that the kettlebell comes back above the knees, and then push the hips back deep into the hinge. And that's the kettlebell swing. I'll show you from a couple of different angles. Face on. Start with the lightweight. As you get used to it, once you feel like the technique is there or thereabouts, go heavier. What you will find, if you jump up, say, from a 16 to a 24, suddenly your technique instantly improves because it has to. It's an intrinsic reaction to the extra weight. So that is the kettlebell swing in a nutshell.